Welcome to New Game Plus. You're listening to a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game, and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name's Kenny.
I'm Nolan.
And this is Elements, our monthly bonus episode brought to you by our devoted patrons.
Yeah, so if you don't know what Elements is, this is somewhat of a break from our normal format. We're not looking at strictly retro games, but what we're doing is looking at 5 different elements of a video game, and then we're going to apply that to a specific game. So
Can you name all 5 of them?
I can. I know them because I wrote them down. It's your gameplay, music, characters, graphics, and story.
Nailed it.
So we will take one of those elements, and then we'll go in depth and look at a specific game that does that element well. So in the past, we've done fighting game characters, we have done the story of Fallout, we have done music of Halo.
Which, by process of elimination, means one of 2 things is probably going to happen logically this week.
Probably, but we're not really sticking to we're going to do these 5 in this order. We're just kind of free form. So that's essentially what this type of episode does.
That being said, we're going to stick to the format for this one.
Yeah.
For Elements number 4, we are going to a series of first-person puzzle platform video games developed by the Valve Corporation. And the game in the universe is actually set in the Half-Life realm and world, which you find out in-game. It's not upright apparent at first, but you find that out as you're playing the game. That's right, we're going to be looking at Portal 1 and Portal 2. And more specifically, we're going to be looking at one element in particular. So join us as we discuss the gameplay of Portal.
Hello, and again, welcome to the Aperture Science Computer-Aided Enrichment Center. We hope your brief detention in the relaxation vault has been a pleasant one. Your specimen has been processed, and we are now ready to begin the test proper. Before we start, however, keep in mind that although fun and learning are the primary goals of all Enrichment Center activities, serious injuries may occur. For your own safety and the safety of others, please refrain from
Por favor, por
donde fallan. Muchas gracias. Turn back. The portal will open in 3, 2, 1.
There's no better place to start with this discussion than talking about our relationship with said series. So, Nolan, I think with you first, because I think you've got the more long and varied history with the series than either Kenny or I do. What's your connection to Portal?
Yeah, so Portal is one of my favorite puzzle games of all time. I think it is wonderfully executed. So I've played both games multiple times. And so preparing for this week was just really, really fun for me because I love everything about the game. Not just the gameplay, but I love every aspect of it.
Kenny, what about you? You probably have the least Portal experience.
Yeah, I do. I played the game specifically because we were going to be talking about it. I say that to my complete embarrassment as somebody who pretends like he's somewhat well-versed in video games, but this is one of those huge titles that I hadn't touched until we were going to touch it. And I owe you guys such credit for making us talk about this game, because it absolutely lives up to the hype. I say that. I have been preparing for it, and I'm not all the way through Portal 2, because these games take a little while to play through. But played all the way through Portal 1 and well into the story of 2. And, man, they're just blowing my mind.
Yeah, I could totally see you enjoying the series with the dark humor and the puzzle. I could totally see this being a really, really good series for you. But to be fair, I don't really fault you too much for not having played this game. It's neither of these games, Portal nor Portal 2, are retro games. And so, it doesn't necessarily fit in line with what we typically do. Portal came out in 2007. So that's
okay. I thought it was older. I thought Portal 1 fell into our time period, but just barely. Yeah. But it doesn't.
It doesn't. And
okay.
it sometimes feels like it could or that it should or would. It's 10 years old, not yet
Right.
15.
It's definitely gotten like classic, iconic status in gaming, and definitely feels a little older, but like graphically and everything else, when you say that, I'm not super surprised.
And it is a unique game, and that's why I didn't have much experience with the series. Nolan always wanted me to play this series, but it never appealed to me. I'm not a huge puzzle game guy, and I've made it clear many times on the podcast before, the two things that I like most in video games is story and character. And in most puzzle games, you do not get that. And so
Right.
I was expecting that out of Portal, so I hadn't played it for the longest time. Had gotten it on Steam sale, both Portal 1 and 2 for just unbelievably
Dirt
cheap.
cheap, yeah.
And then Nolan had finally convinced me enough to try the series, and when I did, I realized that not only was Portal a puzzle game, because it was chock full of character and story.
Ton of it, and done so well. We easily could have done a different topic on this game and had just as much to talk about as talking about the gameplay itself, because the ambiance, the story, the music, all of those things are just top notch, but not in a way that like contradicts the fact that it's a puzzle game. It synergizes all the things it does so well, and it blows my mind.
Dustin, this is the first time I've heard your thoughts on both games. I know you've been playing them, and I've been waiting to hear what you think. I didn't know that you had enjoyed them yet.
Yeah, so the fun thing is Kenny and I are somewhat in the same boat. I've been taking my time. Kenny's kind of rushed and to get his experience with it this week. I finished Portal a couple months back, and maybe a couple weeks ago started Portal 2, or a week ago. They're not long games. Portal 1, I think I played in a matter of a few sittings. Portal 2 is a much more lengthy game, but I've been playing it slowly, enjoying the process, and I'm not yet done. I'm a few stages away. In fact, and we'll talk about shortly, but the last stage that I played last night was one of the stages that Nolan's going to be talking about, and it's late into the game. So you'll hear some of our explanations. As Kenny said, we could have talked about some of the different things here: stories, characters, music, ambiance, all those different things. But some of those you'll find traces of in our discussion about the gameplay of this series. And so how about we just start with you, Kenny, and is what we're going to do. We'll share with you what game we're talking about, what level or what stage from that game, and then we'll talk about that briefly before moving on to the next stage. And we'll do some from Portal 1, some from Portal 2, and hopefully using those stages we'll be able to launch forward into some kind of discussion on some particular gameplay aspects that are apparent in those levels.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about, at first, one of my favorite levels in Portal 1. But before I do, let me just briefly explain how this game works mechanically for someone who's not familiar with it. It's a big enough title that I would imagine a lot of our viewers have played or seen this game. But considering that I hadn't before we needed the excuse to, people may need to know. You described it as a puzzle platformer, and it is, but the way you navigate around this puzzle is through a device called a portal gun, which will let you open up a portal through a wall and then open up the other side of that portal on another wall. And now there's limitations there, but the basic idea is that you can move through space in a lot more directions than you could in a typical game, because you're able to, say, open up a hole in the wall in front of you and then open up a hole on the ceiling, where when you walk through that hole, you would then fall out the hole on the ceiling.
Which, guys, this is a lot more powerful than it first seems.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Do you understand how powerful a portal gun is? And I love that when you first get it in Portal, I mean, it's a portal gun, and you think it just opens up one location, allows you to go into another. But throughout this game, it places you in situations and in test chambers, which Kenny will talk about some, that really test your ability and shows off this gun in powerful ways.
It's almost like the developers were learning themselves as they were developing the game. Like, they were like, wait, we can do this with this gun and with this mechanic. And
it's amazing. I always harp in games that we talk about all the time about whether the game does a good job of like teaching you the gameplay without like walking you through a terrible tutorial, if it can do that naturally. And it's like this entire game is a tutorial, but that's also a test, like a challenging tutorial where it teaches you the game and it teaches you to do new elements and new creative things with the physics of this gun, but in a way that's fun and engaging and ties in with the story, and it's great. And so I want to jump straight into this first level, and this is the place in the story where things have finally gotten a little scary. You've sort of gone through the early levels where you've learned to kind of use your portal gun in the basic ways, and you get into stage 16. And stage 16, I was describing it to the guys earlier, and I said this is the first level where I was like clenching the butt cheeks because things got real. You know what I mean? Like you play a game like this and you start to feel it. I literally think I was sore the day after I spent most of my play.
It's butt cheek?
Way too much.
No, like my whole body. If you've never played a game and like actually clenched up because the ambiance and the tests and things, you're not getting into it enough. And so this is the first stage that happened because there are these enemies introduced. And up till this point, you've been basically navigating puzzles. And now suddenly there's these little white creatures. They're kind of tripod looking, and they've got these guns, and they start shooting at you. And as always happens, if you get shot at least a good amount, you die. You can't progress through this level. And so this is when the story finally starts getting darker, and so the gameplay elements match that story so well. And they've not only added a new enemy, which is great because they add new things for you to learn how to master all the time, but they do it in this really creative way where instead of just moving things around, you're actually pushing items through your portals. And so basically these blocks that you're given, you have to figure out this mechanic of, I should drop this block from the ceiling above the enemy to knock out their little laser turrets. And it's creative. It's the first time you've had to do something like that. And it's intense and just an absolutely great level. You guys remember playing through this one?
Yeah, for sure. And you know what's also pretty cool about this one? We could have done it differently. We could have handled those turrets differently. You didn't have to do a specific thing with your portal gun.
No, you've got lots of choices.
It's pretty open-ended. Yeah, and so I love that. I love that and you'll have to forgive us. A lot of the gameplay is tied to level design, and they did that. They merged those two together so
seamlessly.
Well. So yeah, we're talking about gameplay here, but like just the way that it's laid out and the options that you have, it just makes you think. So also, yeah, this was the one where I was like, hey, wait a second, I could die. This isn't cool. What's going on?
Right, and it slowly brings that up on you. If this is the first place that if Test Chamber 16 is the first place that you are like, wait, I can die, which I think it might be, that means you've gone through 15 other test chambers, and you're increasingly discovering the severity of where you are. It's a beautiful thing that this series does well, is that at first it seems like, okay, things are off, but things are okay, to progressively getting to where like, things
are majorly dysfunctional and something is wrong, and I might not survive this experience.
Yes, I think it's also in this stage that one of the most apparent qualities of the gameplay in the Portal series is kind of starting to be on display. A lot of this is slow reveal, but one of these is in the turrets themselves, is that they talk. They have small little cute girl voices that talk as they see you or as you pick them up. If you pick them up, they don't like that. If you drop them to their side or knock them down, they start shooting wildly while they might be saying something. But the aspect that I wanted to point out there was that this game is all about these contrasting elements of like, here's darkness, but here's also light. Here's cleanliness, but behind the scenes, there's something that's dark and dank and broken. And and you start to see that in some of these turrets. I love the picture that they paint, and that these turrets are these, these cute voices that you actually like. You're not going to care for the turrets themselves, but it's going to make you. It's going to make them appealing to some degree. But at the same time, they are deadly, and a few shots off on you, you're dead.
They are presented like every other thing that they do. They're presented so well where you learn to deal with them, but then more of them are thrown at you, and you have to learn to deal with them in new ways because the things you learned initially aren't good enough. This game's amazing at, like, making you take things one step further than you would have thought to on your own to do it. And so while at first I was just sort of taking out enemies, by the end of the level, I'm hiding behind cubes that I'm pushing out in front of them so that I can't take damage, and I'm, interacting with them in completely different ways than I learned to at the beginning of the level. And it so seamlessly introduces you to, forcing you to think in that way, that it just blows my mind.
Moving on, just one test chamber. I'm going to be looking at test chamber 17 from Portal 1. So like 16 that we just talked about, we were introduced to the turrets, and pretty much a new character in my eyes, because they do talk and they're funny, but also, they have their own personality. Well, in this one, in 17, the Shell, which is the character you're playing, is introduced to the companion cube, which is a very iconic part of Portal, if you've played the series at least. The companion cube is this block, just like the ones that you've seen earlier in the game, but it has a heart in the middle instead of the Aperture logo. And GLaDOS, which we haven't mentioned who that is, she is this computer that is talking to you throughout the entire playthrough.
And she's in control of all the test chambers, all the turrets, the building.
She's facilitating the tests, and the one that is slowly going from, oh, this is a good thing where I'm going through this test, to, oh, what is this AI all about? And things are getting ugly.
Right. So she's trying to, she basically builds up this thing like, you need this thing. This is a very important thing. And you
the companion cube.
The companion cube, sorry. This test chamber makes you rely on it pretty heavily. It's wonderfully crafted. So you can do things with this cube. The first thing you do is you use it as a step to get up to the next block. There are walls in this game that you cannot shoot portals on. And that's a great mechanic that's in place because it prevents you from just easily getting from A to B, because the portal gun, like we said, is very powerful.
Yeah,
well, you use the block to jump up on the ledges to progress. After that, you use it to like block projectiles, use it to lay it on a button, on a lever. So like it has multiple uses in throughout this chamber. You become to rely on it. And then what's my favorite part possibly of the game is this little nook that you stumble upon. It's like this little hole in the wall that you can go through, and it seems that there was some crazy person that was there that has scribbled all over the walls and like made little rudimentary drawings of the companion cube and like hearts around it. I
don't know if this is the first test chamber where you can find one of these secret areas, but I do know that throughout, no, it might be, but I do know throughout Portal 1 and Portal 2, you're finding these hidden rooms that it appears as though some kind of test subject was there before you. And in this particular one, whoever was there had captured some of the facility's cameras and had posted pictures of the companion cube from all different angles. Like over the faces of
people. It's really weird.
Scratched into the wall, just like some really, really creepy stuff. But I love that room, but I love just the idea of the companion cube on its own, because you're all alone all the way up until this point, and then when you're given this, like, it seems like no one's on your side. Nothing. Well, there is no one, but nothing's on your side, it seems. And then now the turrets are after you, and then you're given this companion cube that GLaDOS, that voice, is building up as a friend, and
you fall in love with it, even though it's a little inanimate square object. It's helping you get through the level in ways that you wouldn't have with the portal gun. So again, they're just building on new versions of gameplay like they continuously do. It's insane, but you're navigating things in a new way, and you're depending on, it's like your own little square inanimate teddy bear, and it's super cute.
And you quickly build a relationship with this thing, or at least I did, until you are tasked with doing something with said companion cube at the end of this stage.
You finally get towards the end of the chamber, and you're like, okay, I'm going to grab my cube and we'll go to the next area. But GLaDOS lets you know that Actually, you cannot take the companion cube further. You're going to need to euthanize it, it's what she says, and drop it into this incinerator. And so the player's forced to do that to progress. You cannot leave without doing that.
Guys, I literally still feel guilty about this.
You should.
I knew it was gameplay that was required to progress, and so I threw the companion cube away immediately as soon as she asked. But then I immediately felt like a bad person.
Well, yeah, because GLaDOS tells you like you out of all test subjects before you were the fastest to throw away your companion cube.
Yeah. You can actually wait there for a long time, and I think you can get an achievement. Like if you don't put it in there immediately, it'll give you some companion cube achievement, and you can maybe it's you jump in the incinerator instead that you get the achievement. I think so.
Great.
It's brilliant.
Forget this. I'm not leaving my companion cube. I'm just ending my life. That's
but
dedication.
I do know that to progress, that the only option is to
it
euthanize.
forces you to.
Because I actually paused the game there and went to Discord a few months ago when I was playing, and I said, guys, is there any other way? Because in that brief amount of time, I grew attached to this companion cube.
And it's such a good example of how they integrate their gameplay elements into the story.
Oh, yeah.
Things you're attached to and that you get attached to because you need them to progress and because you've been so isolated and alone. Yeah.
And then it takes it from you, and you have to do the game without it. So
right. But you have knowledge of how to go about levels that you didn't before, because now you will think about going back to the beginning of levels, whereas before it's been linear. It does a brilliant job of teaching you how to solve later puzzles. If you were dropped into this game and had to figure out some of the later puzzles without having gone through the previous ones, and you didn't have a guide, I don't think it would be beatable.
A few stages later, you are outside of the final test chamber, which is test chamber 19, and it's the 21st level of Portal 1. And so you've just recently incinerated your only friend, the companion cube, which is heartbreaking. And now you're about to be incinerated yourself. You've completed the final test chamber, and GLaDOS, that all-seeing AI, has you on a platform that is slowly moving towards a pit of fire. And she's taunting you. The music is, growing with what's about to happen. But you've got a portal gun in your hand. So portals get you out each and every time. You throw a portal past the fire just in time, and maybe your other portal entrance on the wall beside you, and you jump in, escaping your imminent demise. And possibly for the first time, you're behind the scenes in a way that allows you to maneuver around behind the cleanliness that you've been presented with in all of the test chambers thus far.
Yeah, You're kind of outside of that lab environment. You've gotten glimpses of that as you've seen those people who've gone through before you and opened up those secret areas, but you've never gotten to play in those areas. So this opens up kind of a whole new realm of play as you are now making your escape.
I remember my first time going through this game, long time ago, like in 2010 or something, when I first played it. And right before this whole you're going to your death section is a series of very careful moving platform maneuvers where you only get one chance to do it. So when you do it, you're like, yes, I did it. So you think, well, that's great. And then you see that it's almost like it's taunting you even more. And I thought, oh, I messed up. Really? And then it hit me wait, there's a way to get out of this. And because at first, Dustin, you said you have a portal gun in your hands. At first I was it wasn't even occurring to me. I was well, I lost. It's just so well done. Yeah.
They really create this atmosphere that you are helpless. So much so that this GLaDOS robot that is talking to you over and over again, she's got this dark humor of her own that has been programmed into her. She's in control. Even here where you feel like you're helpless moving towards the fire, even once you get past there, it's I'm still in her facility. How long am I going to run before she kills me? Is kind of the feeling that they present to you.
And that first time exploring outside of the test chambers is beautiful because it feels out of bounds-ish. You're not supposed to be there. It totally is. And I feel like as players, even in games like in Halo, I always wanted to get out of bounds so I could cheat. It's like that's always in us. Like we want to see what's outside of where we're supposed to go, and it lets you do that.
It lets you do
absolutely
that
does.
in such a creative way.
And because this outside area isn't this lab environment that you've been used to, suddenly the puzzles that you have to solve become a lot more either you solve them or you don't. Like you've done your training now, and instead of big white walls that you can shoot portals just anywhere and have some really alternative ways of getting through, suddenly it's kind of you either figure out how to get out or you don't. And so even the gameplay difficulty is ramping up, but because each of these levels has taught you what you need to do, you have the tools to get out. It's brilliant.
And along with that, the severity is ramping up. So there was only a few test chambers that we mentioned within there that you could die. You know,
Right.
that death is not a
It's not even like on the radar of things you would consider the first third of the game.
death is not something that you're expecting, and it's not something that you're fearing either until some of these later test chambers. But once you're on the outside, the rules are off, and you've got to maneuver around fans and through access gates, and where there's long drops into goo or acid or just different things. And so like death is now like you're outside of the bounds now. So all the rules are off and anything goes.
Yeah, it's almost like the game's yours now. Like,
Right.
let's see what we can do.
The game is yours, but also the choices that you make, you live with or you die with.
Right.
And the threats are majorly ramping up. And that brings us to the next level that I want to discuss, which is the third part of the escape sequence, Escape Part 3. And this is later on as you've been making your way out and getting a little farther into the world. And you run into this mechanic in the middle of the Escape Part 3 that for a while had me stumped. And so I wanted to bring this up as one of the places that, even though it might have been super easy for some people, if I had been in the story like for real, this is one of the areas that I would have ripped open a wall and been eating a can of beans and scrawling things on the wall because I didn't know how to go forward anymore.
And it's funny that you said that, because in one of the most easy to find hidden areas where one of the test subjects were before you find that right at the start of this area.
At the start of this, yeah. I got stuck a little later on, but this is where that's starting to happen, is where it's clear that other people have gone through this process. And some of them have made it before you and leave like clues scrawled on the wall, and some of them camped out for a long time, apparently because they couldn't progress.
And wrote like just ominous single words like help on the floor.
And it looks like those conspiracy scribbles that people put, like with arrows pointing to different things, trying to explain stuff. Ugh.
And you don't know at first whether to trust them or not, and it just gets real intense. But how, partway through this level, GLaDOS is still trying to kill you, and this little machine pops up where before you had these guys shooting, I don't know, guns or lasers at you. This thing starts chucking missiles
Rocket launcher,
at your face. Yeah, it's a rocket launcher. And it's so crazy because what you've got to do mechanically is use the rockets that it shoots and literally open up portals behind you, convince it to shoot rockets at you, and have placed an exit portal somewhere so that the rockets will shoot out the other end and destroy something that you need. And while that became really evident to me in the fight with it itself when it first popped up and I knew I needed to get through that far glass wall, the fact that later on you had to walk back a long ways, even though you had passed this little gunner for a while, and reopen a portal and then walk way further in the level. And even though it's a long way away and you're not in the same room, you're still porting these missiles, through a big chunk of the level to help break things that you would have forgotten about. And that's where I got a little stuck. I kind of forgot that was a tool I could use because it was listed so much earlier in the level. And so it took me a really long time to figure out that mechanic. But when I did, it was so satisfying.
Well, it's one of the gameplay elements that Nolan, you had mentioned earlier, and that in some of these chambers, and even when you're outside of these chambers, like in the stage, to move forward, you often have to move backwards, which is just so counterintuitive to a lot of games, right? Like that's not the most familiar kind of
Yeah,
process.
right.
And in a lot of puzzle games or in a lot of platformers, you're moving one direction the entire time. But to
Right.
do this, you have to go back to what you saw or did earlier to be able to progress at a later time. And I think it's just a brilliant gameplay decision.
It's starting to make you use all the tools that you've been taught so far, put them together, and see what you can get. And like Kenny said, it just makes you feel so accomplished.
It does.
That's
Every time
awesome.
you figure out a puzzle, you feel good about it, even though it's helping teach you how to do them. And it's just the balance there of difficulty versus holding your hand is so well balanced that it blows my mind. In fact, that even continues into the second portal, where in just the first couple of levels, it makes you do things that I wouldn't have ever thought to do in Portal 1, even though you had all the tools to do them in Portal 1 just to get through the puzzles. And so why don't we jump into Portal 2 and talk through some of those levels real quick?
So starting with Portal 2, I want us to jump forward just a little bit because a lot of the early stages and levels are once again connecting you again to the world and to the realm, taking you through the test chambers in a different way. If you play the game, you're seeing a lot of the same things you saw in the previous game, but at a very, very different time and in a very dilapidated state.
Yeah, it's creatively reminding you of the things you learned in Portal 1. And introducing you to the current state of the world early on, but then you really get into some of the good puzzles later in the game.
Right. I would say even it's, the test chambers, which make up the massive majority of Portal 1, is really just the first part of
It's like
Portal
the tutorial
2.
almost.
It's a tutorial.
Yeah, it's a reminder.
You move through the test chambers fairly quickly, but I do want to point out test chamber 20 in Portal 2. The entire setting of Portal 2 is in the kind of dilapidated, destroyed Aperture Science test chambers that's in all sorts of disrepair. And Test Chamber 20, however, is the first level to be set in a fully repaired, fully functioning test chamber. And once again, I love this gameplay decision that is all about the ambiance. I mean, graphics are in it, music is in it, story, it's all there, but it's this contrasting elements. And Test Chamber 20 is in stark contrast to the rest of the game, which in Test Chamber 20, it's clean and white and perfect and spotless.
Yeah, it feels like Portal 1 again instead of like Portal 2 has been. Yeah, for the first time. But on its own, that's ominous enough.
Oh yeah, very much so. Because there's been a reason for it to be destroyed up until now, but this one's been preserved. And on top of that, the reason why I love it is because it's so minimalistic. There is not much. It's a single room, and there's 3 different laser beams that you must somehow connect to 3 different ports that are on the opposite side of the room, and you've got 2 redirection cubes. That's it. And so very minimalistic. But while it's super simplistic, it's not overtly obvious.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Like you saying it's minimalistic is true, and it makes me a little embarrassed because when I first played Portal 2, I remember this one specifically. When you told me you picked this one, I was like, oh my gosh. I was stuck on this a long time. And when you see how it's solved, it's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I was way overthinking it.
There's so many solutions in this game that are like that, where when you finally figure it out, you go, oh, duh, that should have been so clear. But it wasn't. But it makes you feel good when you do figure it out. It makes it highly satisfactory.
Sure. And just the level of like thought that went into designing a stage that seems easy, but makes you like question yourself. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one that had that kind of problem.
Oh, no, you're definitely not. And I think the thing is that you were taught to think in all of these creative and pretty extreme ways throughout your playing of Portal 1 and even Portal 2 up until this point. So when it comes to something that is relatively simplistic, you don't immediately think that way, and then it's also asking you to do something that you haven't done to this degree yet.
Yeah.
Once again, simplistic, but not
Super
something you would
simple.
immediately think of.
Absolutely. If you know how to do it, this is one of those levels that you can do the whole level in just like 2 or 3 minutes. But that the first time you jump in, it's going to take you a little bit of maneuvering these blocks around and seeing how things interact and testing stuff out and really trying things until it all clicks.
for me, what makes the Test Chamber 20 so standoutish is how vastly different this stage is from all the other stages preceding it. And I mentioned it, but what this game does so well for me is it fosters an eerie and a like a something's not right feeling that just grows as you progress, and to the extreme once you get to the later parts of Portal 2 outside of the test chambers.
Which leads me to my absolute favorite part of possibly the entire series. So you eventually find yourself to the part of the game that is called the Enrichment Spheres. So my favorite Enrichment Sphere is the fourth one. And this also kind of has an out of bounds feel to it, although what you're experiencing is the past. So Aperture, before the pretty test chambers that were crafted up top, you are below that in this like what's left of the old school tests, which are way more dangerous, not as pretty, and introduce a couple of really fun mechanics that we haven't seen yet.
And it's so cool that they're willing to introduce some new mechanics even at this point in the game, where new ways to interact with things and new things to learn.
Yeah, and what the mechanic is, this gel, the two gels that you can now interact with, one being the Repulsion Gel, which is blue, and one being the Propulsion Gel, which is orange. And the orange one speeds you up when you run on it, and the blue one bounces you really high. So now it's almost like a playground for me. Like, I did a lot of experimenting. This part of the game opens up a lot of like creative ways to solve puzzles instead of just using like the portals and what we've had so far. So I just love old school Aperture. You get to see some of the like offices that were there, and even more conspiracy stuff that's going on in the whole, story, the plot line.
And still understand you're using the portals to manipulate some of this gel to be able to accomplish these stages. And you're like in the 1950s when you first get into these enrichment spheres.
Yeah.
By the time you're in sphere number 4, which the one we're talking about now, I think you progressed to the 1970s. And so, but the buttons that you step on are comparable to the buttons that you're stepping on in the test chambers up above, in the clean test chambers that you spent all of Portal 1 and a lot of Portal 2 in, but they're older, like they're a lot more mechanical. So, but you see the age there, and the buttons that you have to press in the blocks, like you've got these cubes that you maneuver around in the test chambers up above, and you get some here, but they're like a lot more ancient, 1950s, 1970 boxes, and I love that.
To me, it feels like these inventions didn't work. They were not successful, and they left them out of the final product upstairs, making all of these enrichment chambers feel ghetto and like way more dangerous, but to me, all the more fun. So in this one, you're using Propulsion Gel to run and get over large pools of acid, and then like using your portal gun to like cake the floor with more of it later and use it there and then bounce. It's
awesome. And you're combining all that
awesome.
with
It's
like
so fun.
the conservation of momentum that happens, where if you're like running or falling through a portal, that you keep your speed and direction that you've had to use so much up till this point, but now you're using in completely new ways. They just build so well on game mechanic and then building new game mechanics on those and exploring other opportunities that gives them for gameplay. It literally is just some of the most thoughtful game design that I've seen in any game I've ever played.
Yeah, and just an added bonus is the noise that it makes when you're running on the gel. It does this little like, I don't know. It just is like this noise that happens that makes it feel all the more epic. It's like dun 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 dun.
It's like maybe your gun is making that noise is the only thing that I could make. I mean, your gun is a very special thing, and by this time you've got an addition, a friend that is attached to your gun as well.
Yeah,
that
spoilers.
I've seen many pictures of before, never knowing what it was, and now that I know what it is, I just love it, man.
Yeah, you have to love it. And honestly, to me, like just talking about these games with you guys, I like this series more than Half-Life. I'm sorry, but I think this is the best that Valve has ever made.
Well, and you get the same feeling, right? Like in Half-Life as well as Portal, you get the feeling that something's not right. There's a greater thing going on. You're just a pawn in it all, and you're trying to escape the forces of something that's greater than you. You kind of get both of that.
They play on
that
your
feeling.
emotions and know how to make that part of their game so well. Like, they're just great storytellers, and yet they do that with really genius gameplay in both of those games, but in this one especially, and it's so just satisfying. It's why this company became massive. It's why they were successful. We probably wouldn't have Steam today being what it is without the genius of the gameplay elements of Portal being so well thought out.
And that's Portal. Kenny, are you going to finish Portal 2?
I'm absolutely going to finish Portal 2. One was so great, and 2, when you first start it, I actually was afraid I was going to like it a lot less, but they immediately did some new and creative things that got me rehooked, and then I got a little annoyed of like the starting character that you have early on, and was like, oh, the vibe of this game's even going to be different, and then that quickly like changed as well.
You're
I don't
crazy
know.
if you don't like Wheatley.
Right. Wheatley makes it for me. So I'm going to finish it as well.
Well,
but
Dustin, just when you think they can't add another edition of gameplay, there's a co-op after you, like, I would suggest playing Portal 2, and then we should play co-op that you go through the puzzles together, and it's just an extra layer.
Well, and they've
of fun.
got a little story there too, right? Like,
yeah,
it's a
they do.
thing.
It's a little subplot.
That would be great. I'd love to either watch you guys play that or jump in some of that with you guys, because it's one of the more genius games that I've on its gameplay elements and everything else that I've ever touched, and I'm so glad that we gave me finally the excuse to play it.
I will say this, for those that are hesitant to start the series because you think it is merely a puzzle game and that it's not going to have some of the other gameplay elements or characteristics of games that you enjoy, like story or characters, I promise you that this game has the characters and has the story, and then obviously has some superior level gameplay to many other games. And this is a game for most gamers. I think it's a quality game, and a lot of that shines through in the gameplay.
Well said.
You might know by now, but Elements is our monthly additional episode. It's a step away from what we regularly do week to week, and looking at retro video games. We look at games or series and take one element out of it and kind of do a deep dive. This is our 4th installment in that. We hope that you've enjoyed it, and we really appreciate those that have made it possible through our Patreon.
Yeah, we always thank our patron supporters and our producers, but this week you literally gave me an excuse to be exposed to one of the greatest games I've ever played in my entire life. And
Wow.
Thanks for that.
Love that.
Yeah, it's high praise, but it's that good. And thanks for all of your just consistent support. Our producer level supporters, especially Zion, Bradley, Gimbarino. You guys are great, but all of our community that interacts with and supports what we do in talking about old video games and the things that make video games great, you guys are just the best.
And speaking of that community, we would love for you to join us. It's very easy to do because we have a Discord. It's a place that you can chat, talk about the games that we're currently playing, games that you want us to play, or just life. So find an invite link to that on our Twitter, and come hang out and chat with us. We'd love to connect.
Yeah, and you can always find us on social media, Twitter and Facebook at NGP Podcast. You can email us your thoughts on any game of the week, or if you just want to chat, you want to chat about Portal or any other game, we'd love to talk to you, ngppodcast@gmail.com. You can subscribe to us to get our regular weekly episodes. And then if you want to find out more kind of behind the scenes additional content that we produce regularly, we often send those to our patrons first, patreon.com/NGP podcast. Until next time, I'm still Dustin.
I'm completely in love with a new franchise.
And I'm Nolan.
And thank you for joining us for this very special bonus episode of New Game Plus.